Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy, the Strongest Wizard, and we are back here with another One Piece video. Today, I'm going to be doing something kind of fun. I'm actually here with the man, the myth, the legend, Clyde TCG, and we're actually going to be going over our thoughts and opinions about the actual Black and Luffy deck. I feel like it's been seeing like a huge resurgence, or just like people like really realizing how good the deck actually is. But before all that, Jackson, Clyde, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on here. And yeah.
I'm so excited to talk about this topic just because you and I have been talking a lot about Luffy for some time now. I feel like a lot of people in OPO7 didn't really know where to go in the format and the meta. There's just such a huge variety, and I think this is the first time ever we don't have like an absolute like tier 1 deck like we saw with like Sakazuki or maybe like Red Green Law. So yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts overall on the meta right now?
It's exactly like you put it. I don't think there's a clear-cut best deck, at least not yet. And it honestly comes down to what you kind of prefer. Like, you prefer like a certain play style, you prefer like a certain deck that has good matchups in a certain thing or consistency. So honestly, I think there's like 5 decks where you can play, where I think like you're not trolling yourself if you really want to win it. And it's just up to what, vibes best with you. But yeah, it's a really fun meta in that aspect. It really tests your matchup knowledge because you're gonna go against like 6 different decks in any tournament run, and it really puts your all that play testing to use.
Yeah, I feel like early on in the very beginning, we saw kind of like the meta in the East, how it like kind of developed and flourished, and I feel like Luffy was really, really big. And I think like when it first started coming out here and all the cards started being like shown and everyone started testing everything, I just felt like since the beginning I've always been like, yo, Luffy, best deck in the format, at least one of the best. Like, I think there's like no way anyone can be like, nah, I don't think it's that good. The deck is just extremely versatile, and like one of my like favorite things about the deck is that how versatile the actual deck list is in itself. And talking a little bit about people's runs, this past weekend you did a pretty insane job at the Gen Con online events, the Treasure Cups. You went back-to-back 9-1 for Saturday and Sunday, and that's insane, especially with the deck. I think a deck like Luffy, where you literally your attention span needs to be like, you can't make one mistake. Like,
Yeah, it's a pretty like nuanced deck. When it first came out, or when I first saw it in action, I'm like, oh, it's basically new Whitebeard. It's just like a stat check deck. You have a powerful leader, powerful cards, and you just kind of run over your opponent with large hands or something. But after playing the deck more, like I realized there's a lot of small things you gotta worry about. There's a lot of future turns you have to think about, or even just setting up your trash or things. And it's a lot more complicated deck than I gave it credit for, or that I saw. So yeah, playing it over 3 straight days was really rough, but I was watching a lot of my videos, and I kind of just got into the flow of things where it just became second nature to me. You have a deck that you play a lot, then you just know every play by heart. And yeah, it's actually a really hard deck to sequence, and that's why I like refuse to play the deck on Sim, because I'm pretty sure my win rate on Sim is like less than 50% with BY Luffy, because I'm either making one mistake like sequencing wrong, or I don't have something in trash just because I'm not checking. But yeah, it's a deck I refuse to play on Sim.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. In the very beginning, I think my win rate was like, I don't know, it was god awful. And then as I started to play on the Sim a lot more, I was like, okay, I'm kind of getting the hang of it, but I just don't like playing it online. Obviously, that's not due because of the Sim itself. It's just because it's just different having the cards in your hand, you know?
Right.
Now, I do know that Saturday and Sunday you did an amazing job. Saturday you got top 8, and then Sunday you got close to being top 8. You got 9th, 10th?
10th. I think I was like the lowest X1 just because I lost the first run.
Yeah, it happens. But I know that on Friday, you didn't get as lucky, or you didn't play as well as you thought you were going to compared to the other days. Can you talk to me a little about what happened on that whole situation?
Yeah, so Friday was the first day of tournaments, and the day before, actually, there was like a in-person regional, and I saw like a couple of black, yellow Luffy lists that topped, and I saw some cards that I wasn't playing, and I'm like, oh, maybe they know something, so I just threw in some of the cards they were playing into my list without even testing it. And then like on Friday, those cards kind of like messed up my flow with the deck. Like I wasn't used to playing with them, or it just wasn't really cohesive. I did still do pretty well Friday. I think I started like 6-1 or something. Then I like lost the last 3. So I think part of it was probably like tilting because I whiffed a lot on searches that day. Part of it is probably just me not using the cards. But overall, like I don't think I played too much differently. It might be like I don't like to blame variance. But it was like a lot of whiffs that in games that I ended up losing like by 1 card or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually, I think I was looking at the list that because I think every day you ran a slightly different version, right?
Yeah, it'd be like 1 or 2 cards difference.
That's insane, dude. Like I feel like with Sakazuki, we all had like the same 48 cards, and then there was like 2 something were different, but for the most part, everyone had the same list. And
Right.
I feel like with Luffy, it's insane. So like, what made you constantly try to change it up a little bit? And we'll talk about the tech cards right now, but what made you? Did you feel like were you like, okay, I saw too much of this card, I gotta change it up, or I needed this? Like, what was your thought process on changing per day the deck list?
It was kind of like that where I felt like, oh, like this card didn't come with that much. Maybe I don't need 2 copies. Or it'd be like, oh, like I really want to see 4 of this card. Or it would just be like small things where I don't think they matter in the grand scheme of things, but I just kind of use these tournaments as like my play testing. I don't like to play test that much outside of tournaments. I like to test it in like a real competitive environment. And it would just be like where I just want to see like, oh, what would happen if I ran this ratio or something. And like ultimately it might not matter, but it just, sometimes it felt better, sometimes it didn't. There's no real kind of science to it.
Yeah, and going over some of the tech choices that a lot of people are running right now, I've been saying a lot that, every deck is very different, every Luffy deck, and we've had like some pretty insane people like results. We had like the No Heroes regional, like 1,000 players. Christian won that, and what's special about his build is he ran 2 copies of Kuzan, 2 copies of Perona. He ran Aces, and as well as Ice Age. And I know where you're thinking, you're probably thinking like, okay, Ace is not really a tech choice. Well, I think it kind of is. A lot of people choose not to play Ace. A lot of people choose to run different amounts of copies, including yourself. And another card that's super popular right now, I think mainly because of Eggman, surprisingly, is Newgate. I did not see that coming at all. I mean, there's so many different tech options. You can run Thunderbolt. I kind of feel like the Search is a bit of a tech choice. I feel like half of the people run it, half of the people don't. I think for the most part, though, a lot of people are running that card. But there's also the 5-cost Sabo. That's the yellow card that actually gets to remove a body on the board, plus trash one of your own life. Helps you accelerate so that you can awaken faster. Yeah, I mean, do you feel like that's all the tech choices are possibly a little overwhelming? Like, I feel like I look at the list and I'm like, man, I have so much testing to do. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it is, but if you look into like the grand scheme of meta, like it's not harder to build than something like Lucci or Red Purple Law, which have like, there's gonna be no 2 players with the same 2 lists unless they play test each other. I think Black Yellow Luffy is kind of lucky in that probably like 30 cards are like guaranteed, like the babies, adults, Sabos, and Luffys. And then like, the 2Ks, a lot of it is pretty solved. If you're changing some tech cards, it's probably gonna be like a 6-card different max from any 2 people. And at that point, it really comes down to like, I try to theorize as much as I can before I put cards in, but it's just, this is a deck that you need to kind of build based on feel. Like you just need to try it out, see how it feels. It could be good in theory, but it might not play out well. So this is a deck you just need to try everything and just see what matches well with you.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like another thing that's pretty big here is the matchups. I know a lot of people like to choose Black Yellow Luffy because of how good your matchup is overall across the board around the meta right now. But there's just one matchup that is the bane of this deck's existence, and it's just like, it kills me every time I see it in a tournament, and that's Bonnie. There's a ton of different ways that people play around Bonnie. Some people go super aggressive. Some people just like get ready for that one Zoro turn. How do you approach Bonnie in that matchup, and do you feel like it's that tough?
Yeah, I think by far it's one of your worst matchups. And that's part of the reason like I chose the tech cards I really did. Like Ice Age is a card that's been underperformed for me for like basically almost every matchup. But I really like having that 1-card answer to 9-cost Zoro, whether Bonnie plays it or Perona plays it or some other green deck. And yeah, I think that no matter what you tech for it, like against a really good Bonnie player, you're still like 20-80 unfavored. I just have to hope that like all the best Bonnie players either don't see me or don't draw well, or I just hope I see like everything I need against them. I had one Bonnie game where I basically like demolished him just because I saw the absolute best curve possible against him. Where like if he even drew like his best hand, I think I still would have beat that just because my hand was just that crazy.
Yeah. You told me a little bit about that. You double drop Kuzan on him, and I'm like, dude, like, how do you? That's insane. Like, the high roll's crazy. And I feel like sometimes you just get that lucky, right? Like you just have the pieces, but at the same time is that you're able to kind of figure that piece, that that lineup together. Not a lot of people would be able to do that. I feel like a lot of people get kind of scared, a little nervous. You were mentioning Ice Age. I know it's like what's that one card that you don't really ever need, but when you do need it and you have it, it's really, really nice.
Right.
It's tough. It's super, super tough. And I think that's like probably your worst matchup along with maybe Blue. I think a lot of people are having a lot of issues with Blue as a Luffy player. Noah, then Dofi. I'm not sure which one's worse. What do you think?
I think personally Dofi is worse just because they can go wide earlier. They can like threaten you. They can swing 7k bigger. Like with Bo, if they swing at you, you can just counter out easily. But if Dofi does the same thing, you have to ditch 2 cards for it. I honestly haven't played against those too much. I played against it a little, but I probably need more like dedicated, like straight up Dofi and Boa testing for like a good hour.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. At locals, I face like 2 every single tournament, but at a big regional at the Treasure Cup this past weekend, since I did enter twice, I didn't see a single blue deck. Like it's crazy. I think that just like tells you that people are serious about blue, but when it comes to the bigger tournaments, maybe they're just like, all right, I'll play Lucci, I'll play Law, something like that.
Right.
So that's like your worst matchups, right? What do you think are the best matchups for Luffy?
I think the best matchup, like everybody says, like the black decks, like Moria, Lucci, just because you can just spam Sabos all the time. And I do think it's like one of your best matchups. I don't think it's as one-sided, as a lot of people think it is. Like I think it's maybe like 70-30, 60-40 for both of those. But those are like the reason why you play Black Luffy, because you want to have good matchups into those really popular decks. And then some other random decks like Reiju, you have really good matchup against because they can't do anything against your 9k leader. And then I think just mostly black decks and then some rogue decks.
Yeah, it's like super interesting. I feel like against black, a lot of the black decks, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's like you easily 100% win that. Like if you lose to black, that's like, how did you lose? But I feel like more often than not, all your opponent has to do is just not attack, drop a whole bunch of ACOS bodies, and hopefully you can awaken fast enough before they have this huge protective board. You know what I'm saying? So it can get pretty scary.
Yeah. My games all usually come down to the wire.
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like if anyone was thinking about picking it up, since you did end up picking up Luffy, are you like fully committed to Luffy for OPO 7?
Not fully committed. I definitely think it's probably like I'm leaning to the most just because I have so much time into it. But I can see myself playing Lucci. I can see myself playing Red Purple Law. It's probably one of those 3 just because I think those 3 are the best decks. But I think Black Luffy is definitely number 1 right now for me.
Yeah, man. I mean, taking a look at like your record of like all the decks you used to play, you've played Zoro, you've played Red Green Law, you've played obviously Sokka. Like, what was it that Luffy kind of like attracted you to be like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to take this deck for 3 tournaments in a row.
I think the biggest thing is, like I said, the top 3 I think are Lucci, Law, and like your Luffy, but Luffy is probably the most consistent out of 3, and I really value consistency. I think having non-games or having like no impact or influence on the result of the game because I brick or something is something I really don't ever want to do. So I really value the consistency. I think that's the biggest reason why I was leaning towards Black Luffy. You get to play 2 searchers, or most people do. I guess everyone besides Eggman plays 2 searchers. So that really ups your consistency.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Eggman's list running 0 searchers, crazy to me. That like blew my mind, bro. I was like, wait, what? But I think like a lot of people, when they ask me like, hey, should I play Luffy? Should I pick it up? Oftentimes I usually tell them no. It's not just because I'm trying to gatekeep them of playing the deck. I just feel like the deck is extremely like difficult to play. I know a lot of people, we were talking about this earlier, a lot of people think, hey, just drop Gecko on 10, you 2 life, every single turn, you win. But it's like, okay, after that turn, after those 2 turns you do that, you get easily gassed out super fast.
Right, yeah. I think people do look at like, you have a really easy 10 down play, like you just drop 1 card and you just do your things. But it's like navigating the early part of the game, not losing too much resources, or even the late part of the game when you don't have Gecko, where you kind of like separate the good like Luffy players to the bad ones.
Yeah, and I feel like looking at the sim and all the win rates and all that good stuff, all that data that we have, I do feel like a lot of people are kind of on that edge of like it's really difficult to play and they struggle for the majority of the time. I honestly, I feel like maybe like, I don't know, like 20% of like all Luffy players are like super good. And then the rest are like kind of struggling to get by, including myself, of course. So, you know, it's definitely a learning process, but I think like as people continue to practice the deck, I definitely think it's obviously worth picking up. It's just an investment to do, right? So,
Right. But yeah, I mean, if any deck you pick up the set, it's gonna be really hard. So you just gotta. I tell everybody, it doesn't matter like of the top 3 or 5 decks you want to play, just pick one and then just master it.
yeah. All right. So this is my final question to you, Jackson. You said earlier we have Law, we have Lucci, and we have RP Law. Do you think Luffy is the best deck? Because there has to be a best deck in the format. All right. I know we all got the same level. Do you think Luffy is the best deck in the format right now?
If you were like to make me choose, like guns in my head, I would honestly say Law is. I think Law has the best matchup spread. It has like decent consistency, and yeah, I mean, I just really value the matchup spread. I think that what's turning me away from playing Law is that like the one is the mirror is like very nuanced. I think it like playing the Law mirror is like super hard, and the people who can come out on top of that consistently are like really good Law players. And yeah, like I would have to say Law.
Yeah, definitely. And what's even crazier too is that like the Law matchup isn't that super amazing either. Like I feel like sometimes you can kind of feel there's a turning point against Law. Is that if you can kind of get over that little hump before they rush you down and just kill you, if you can win out of that, you're pretty much golden. But there's like there's like the first like 4 turns where I'm like terrified of my life. Like I'm like, okay, how many Kitten Killers did they see? How many Rages did they see? Because it's not just one, it's the other as well, right? Like they have to see Kitten Killer, and if they see Rage, I'm like, dang, now they have the counter to last a little longer. I can gas them out. I can like starve them of materials and cards. So yeah, that matchup I think is, well, I don't know. Would you it's like unfavored for Luffy, or what do you think?
I think if it's a really good Law player and a really good Black Yellow Luffy player and they draw equally well, I think Law is slightly favored. I think if it's like okay Law player, okay Black Yellow Luffy player, then Black Yellow Luffy is probably favored. It really depends on RP Law. I think the onus is on them to know the matchup, whereas Black Yellow Luffy, it's not hard to know the matchup there, but Law has to really know the matchup. But yeah, it's just a really hard matchup because they have like 2 different ways of beating you, whether it's ramping a lot and then swinging for big numbers in late game, or aggroing you out in the early game, whereas your game plan is the same. Just survive the early game and drop 2 Morias on them. Yeah,
I feel like, I think you brought up a really good point. I feel like in this like meta right now, I feel like there's like a huge line of like really good top tier players that are playing meta decks versus people that like are decent at the game and that are just, they're trying to get through it. And I feel like the space in between them is a lot larger than I think in most sets. I feel like when a good Lucci player picks up Lucci, I'm terrified. Like I'm like, oh dude, this guy. Same thing with Law. And I'm like obviously when you play against a black deck as Luffy and they start attacking you, you're like, okay, they don't know the matchup, right? Like as soon as they start attacking or they feel like they're forced to do something, I'm like, okay, they don't know the matchup. They're a little less experienced in this matchup. I have a lot of an easier time playing against them, but with the top player decks, with like a lot of the top, tier players, a lot of the matchups can get kind of rough. Like I feel like a good Law player can almost like win against anybody.
Yeah, I think this format is really funny in that it's like at one point it's more variance because like you can have really bad matchup spread, or you can go against your worst matchup a lot of times, but it's also more skill. And that sounds like hypocritical, but I think that the more skill part comes in like how much you know each different matchup, because you have to play so many different decks now. You have to know how to navigate each matchup. Like one example is that I played against Anel when we were both like 6-0 on Saturday, and he was telling me that he was cooking like every Black Yellow Luffy player. Like he played 4 that day or like 6 over the entire weekend, and he beat them all. After we played and I beat them, he's like, oh, that's not how like my other Black Yellow Luffy matchups went. He's like, oh, like well played, that kind of stuff. So I think like that's where the skill comes in knowing how to navigate each different matchup.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I feel like the Anel matchup for Luffy is pretty. I feel like it's a little one-sided. I feel like Luffy pretty dominantly wins that matchup. At least for the ones that the players I've played against, right? Just because you have that start deck 13 Luffy that can just pull you all your cards, that they can't starve you of anything. But obviously, if you can see a lot of your smaller pieces and you've cut out some of that search engine, all those event cards, so you don't see your pieces, It can get kind of rough, of course, but for the most part, you got protection for removal, you have the draw power, and you have the power. And just the fact that your leader's in 9k is pretty nice.
Right, yeah. That matchup is like has people on different ends of the spectrum. Some starved in now, some attacked in now. Some people think it's an L favor, some people think it's UP favored. Like there's so many different opinions now, and it's still early, so people are still forming them and like kind of solidifying their opinions.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you so much, Clyde, enough taking a whole bunch of your time today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you going over your, obviously your run this past weekend. And if you guys are interested, Clyde actually does have a Patreon that he has a ton of guides. He even goes over this weekend's his runs in general too, so round per round, which is obviously incredible information to have. So once again, thank you so much for coming on here.
No problem. Thank you as always. It was really fun to be here, and yeah, thank you.
All right, see you.